Do you have an interest in wild plants but don't know how to identify them? Or do you get intimidated going outdoors for activities like hiking or camping? And learning about these wild plants would help alleviate that. Then this is the video for you. So this is my good friend Robert Silas. He's a master forager. He's spent over 30 years studying plants and identifying them and finding out their uses, as well as a lot of hands-on experience. So Robert, what's our plan for today?
Today we're at Plumb Creek Park in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we're going to walk around the park, let everyone enjoy their dogs, while we enjoy looking at all these wild, edible, and some medicinal plants, and a lot of invasive plants, but we're going to take a look at what's around us. So I'm excited to be here with you.
All right, so we've already walked 7 feet, and Robert has already identified a plant, and we're going to talk about that right now.
Well, it's because I bypassed the 30 other plants that were within those 7 feet, but this one is an important one. So right down at my feet, this is called Broadleaf Plantain. Very important plant. It's introduced to the United States. Common name for this is called white man's footprint, because everywhere the white man went, it would show up. But it's got an interesting characteristic where the veins on the bottom side are very prominent. If I pull this leaf out, which it is a weed, so I'm going to pull this, you'll actually be able to hear, possibly, and you see these veins. If I break, these veins are very strong. Sometimes they will still be visible as you pull it apart. This plant, personally, I've used, so I like to make sure when I show people plants, I have an intimate knowledge where I've actually utilized 8 or in some other way I know the plant. Bee stings, and venomous caterpillars, fire ants, poison ivy. This plant, when you break it up and put the juices on the affected part, it acts as a very strong astringent, creates a lot of capillary action where it pulls out of your system whatever is in there. So I've had a saddleback caterpillar, for example. Interesting little creature, but it feels like fire ants. I think formic acid is what they envenomate you with. Picking my muscadines, really bad, painful sting, and I've seen online where people have days where this huge rash is just unmanageable, but no more than 15 minutes of slight agony after I put this juice on, and it was gone. And I've had that happen on 2 occasions. Bee stings, my wife stepped on a bee walking barefoot in my yard. Wasp actually put this on within 5 minutes. You know, she has no sensation at all. So a very good plant to make a very quick poultice and basically get that green gold and put it on your ailment. So plantain, very easy to identify by these basal leaves, strong veins, and it's edible too. Creates flower heads. I'm sure we'll see some that you can fry up. Make a little stir fry with, but it's not the most flavorful thing. But plantain, not the banana.
So Robert has just pointed out something to me. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, no, this is just the seed head of this broadleaf plantain. It's going to have a really long stalk full of these seeds. There's a different type of plantain that I'm sure we'll find called narrow leaf plantain or English plantain. And basically it looks more like a blade of grass in comparison to this broadleaf. And it has a really long stalk with no flowers until you get to the top, and it's got a little bitty tuft of it. A lot of kids used to wrap it around their finger and pop it.
Oh,
like
yeah.
So you remember that.
Yeah.
But this is the plant, and here's the stalk. But this is edible. I don't know if a dog peed on this one, so I'll pretend I'm eating it. You never know. But it's not. It's mucilaginous. A little bit. I'll tell you actually another little story, so we'll keep going here. This plant, there's a family of plant that has the same property that's been used back in Egyptian times, psyllium husk. So the husk from these seeds, a similar plant, in Egypt, we would know it as Metamucil. So high fiber, the seed husk can also be used in a similar way. It doesn't get as goopy or mucilaginous as regular Metamucil, but it still has that same property. Broadleaf Plantain. Well, looky here. As I talk about two introduced species of plantain, we looked at this broadleaf where the flower comes up in a very long raceme of flowers. And then right next to it is what I was talking about earlier with our lance leaf or narrow leaf or English plantain. Completely different in contrast to the broadleaf. Same property though, but this is the distinction from the flowers. And again, I don't remember how to do this, but we talked about how kids would pop that off like make a little popping sound.
That's right, that's right.
But both of these, you know, you take a leaf, crunch it up, and as I'm squeezing it here, especially with a little bit of morning dew, it's easy just with this one leaf to get, you see this green juice coming out?
I do.
This is amazingly astringent to be able to pull toxins out from nettles, poison ivy, rubbing it on just to make sure it's not penetrating the skin, and any type of bee sting or ant sting.
So how did you really get started in plant identification?
You know, that's really interesting. Honestly, when I was a kid, like 5 years old, I remember someone asking all the kids in the family what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I said I wanted to be an Indian selling pottery on the side of the road. And I don't even know where that came from, but I just never got away from it. And I remember watching some PBS special where the Inca, they were showing how they, still to this day, will braid grass and end up making ropes by braiding grass and braiding those braids of grass into larger braids of grass. So they made ropes where they could traverse across these ravines.
Wow.
And I thought, how do they take grass and turn it into a rope? And that just, it clicked. I went out and started trying to do it and I failed. And then kind of the byproduct of learning how to do that is you have to know what plants are good for it.
Sure.
So I started going and just devouring every book I could get. This was before YouTube, before Google, and all books on wild, edible, medicinal plants. There were Tom Brown. He's kind of a well-known author. I'll talk about that real quick. There's some controversy behind him, but he was very good at putting out books that talk about wilderness survival skills. This is before bushcraft became popular. And when I got these books, then I started saying, wow, he's talking about making fire by rubbing sticks together, and that's going to be cool. And I failed miserably. I remember I was working with you actually.
Yes.
And I would go in as I was trying this, and one of our co-workers would write on the board like, day 37. You get fire yet? No, still smoke. But it just perpetuated my desire to learn that. So through books and learning how to make cordage and then fire, you can't do that unless you really know how to identify the plants. So again, the byproduct of learning plants is you start learning which ones are edible, which ones are medicinal, which ones are useful. And I just never stopped. It's enjoyable. And while we're walking, we've passed about 6 other things that I'd like to show you, so we may backtrack here. So as we're walking on the sidewalk, this is, you know, a lot of the weeds are in a disturbed area. That's why we call them weeds. People don't like them growing, you know, on the side of a sidewalk or whatever. But this is a small example of what we know as poor man's pepper. These little seed pods here kind of give it away. A little tuft of flowers and the little seed pods that almost look like little circles. This plant almost has a slight horseradish or wasabi type of a flavor. I'm actually going to chew one of the leaves. Again, hopefully a dog didn't pee directly on this one, but as I eat that, you know, it's a little green twig. But about 3 seconds after you start chewing it, that pop of kind of horseradish or wasabi is going to hit you. And I see your eyes.
It sure did. Yeah. And I love wasabi, by the way.
Yeah. So obviously this is just a raw green. We don't usually walk through the grocery store and just pull parsley and start chomping on it. But, you know, what can you do with this? I've used it in a couple different ways. I've made a little, not poultice, but I've ground it up and used it as a little side item for some raw sushi. I've put the seeds in soup to give it a little bit of a kick. Anyway, this is poor man's pepper, Virginia peppergrass, Lepidium virginicum. But anyway, I'm getting all nerdy on you, but that's what I like to do.
I love it.
So here's that Virginia pepper grass or poor man's pepper that we saw earlier. This is a much better specimen. It's growing, it can grow very tall and bushy, but this is that peppery spice. Take some of these seeds home. Also, what's interesting about this, my wife loves doing flower arrangements. These are common, these seed heads are common additions to flower arrangements that you can get at grocery store. I was actually at a nice quality steakhouse, and they had little ornamental arrangements on the tables, and they had this in one of them, and I thought, wow, they don't even know that they put a wild edible on my table for dinner.
That's awesome.
So we're walking past this field, and there are a ton of different wildflowers here, a bunch of plants, and they may all look the same, but we can get a close-up look at some plants to see a distinct different one. Right here, this is called the common name called wing stem, and if you look real close, you can see the stem actually has little wings on it, right?
Sure does.
So, there's a use for this as far as that spindle. When this dries out, you can use that as a friction fire hand drill.
Wow.
This other plant here that's growing tall, sometimes you see it with just a basal rosette. This is called evening primrose, and if you notice, the vein almost looks a little pink. I don't know if you can get it in the right light, but it's pretty easy to see that pink vein even from a distance as you're walking by. This produces tiny yellow flowers that are edible. You can add them to salads or whatnot. But the root is a peppery, again, kind of like horseradish, peppery type of a white root that can be, shredded or roasted, and it's that peppery taste, which we were talking about pepper grass a minute ago. So similar, this root. Some people have a little bit of a mild allergic reaction where it may cause their tongue or throat to itch. But always cooking it, adding it to your roasted parsnips or carrots or whatever, it just gives a different kick. And I'm going to keep walking and show you something else. When we move just a little bit further, again, this is green, but it looks different. We just looked at that plant that has that pink vein. Now we're looking at plants that looks like there's in threes, every one of them. So it's got 3 lobes all over here. This is called giant ragweed. So ragweed will bloom in the fall, and you'll get the yellow flowers, and everyone gets that ragweed kind of hay fever allergy response, and it's coming from this plant here. Edibility, what we know historically, there are other varieties of ragweed that we believe our ancestors used the seeds to extract oil, and they would use that for adding to their cooking and whatnot. So I don't think that we have any of that locally around here. I don't know anyone that uses these seeds currently for extracting oil, but it was one of the byproducts from our ethnobotanical research into our ancestors.
Very nice.
We made it 13 steps, so we're doing
maybe
good.
14.
I like your optimism. Just an example here of 2 different plants in the same family. We looked at this earlier, depending on how you edit your filming. This is giant ragweed with that 3-lobe leaf, but right next to it is common ragweed, and it just has more of a fern-like appearance. It almost looks kind of like the carrot we looked at. Both of these will produce yellow flowers,
and this is what people have a lot of trouble with in the South, right?
Oh yeah. So the fall, some people have spring allergies, some people have allergies throughout the year, but in the fall, allergies come pretty apparent when ragweed comes out, and it gives another plant that I'm sure we'll find called goldenrod a bad name, because goldenrod makes a wonderful great tea. It's one of my favorites. It's my first wild edible. I know we'll find it, but makes a wonderful herbal tea, but it blooms at the same time as ragweed. So 2 yellow flowers blooming in the same field, and it gets a bad rap. But this is common ragweed, and right next to it, giant ragweed. Awesome. So here we have pretty good specimen, large size, easy to see. This is a common violet. Now we don't see the flowers right now, but the flowers are violet. You're supposed to pan at me when because that's sarcastic, The flowers are violet. Anyway, this plant has been used for a spinach substitute. So when somebody needs to saute some greens, this is used. It's actually still used pretty commonly today. It just has a mild flavor. Like many plants, it's high. It's got some, quality vitamin C content. But anyway, and growing right next to it, as I'm just bending down here, This is, looks like poison ivy, and we'll give a little discussion about it. But this is a common ground bean or ground peanut, hog peanut. There's different names for it, but sometimes this will grow in patches where it's like there's a whole wall. The vine is just so prolific, and under the ground there's a small, it's almost like a pinto bean that is under the ground that you have to be very careful digging the root up. But you can get, you know, a nice handful from a large patch, and it's giving you good quality nutrients, good quality starches. But a little hog peanut next to our violet. All of these asters, I'm not sure what they are. I remember going on a plant walk with this guy, really popular guy down from Alabama, and I would point at everything and he would say, that's an aster. I'm like, well, what's this? That's an aster. Aster is a very large family of plants, but these could be New York ironweed, it could be fleabane, it could be a ton of different things. It's hard to tell until they flower, unless some are very particular. But right in the midst of this, we have pretty unmistakable red clover. So this red clover here has 3 leaves, nice pretty pink. Actually, this is a very tall species. I wonder if it actually is just the common red clover or some variety. But as it grows really tall here, looking for sunlight, all clovers, they're in the pea family, but they're all edible. You can make fritters out of the flowers, or eat the flowers in salad, or the leaves, or make, most people, what they do is they'll collect the flower heads while they're in flower, while the bees are enjoying them, and they'll put them in or let them dry, and then use it as part of an herbal tea remedy, right? So maybe they have some spearmint and clover or whatever. But
I was actually thinking of things up here that could be made into teas, which is one of the things I was going to ask you about. So it's fortunate that you pointed that out.
When people think foraging, a lot of people, their mind goes straight to mushrooms, because historically when you hear foraging, it's over in Europe and they're foraging mushrooms. But when you look at wild plants, you know, I can promise that around the next bend we're not going to find a Big Mac. But there's plenty of things that you can make tea from, and clover being one of them. And plantain, you could add that to it. So a little bit out of reach, but this one's a little closer. This is called dock, curly dock. If you look at the leaves, there's a good example here. The leaf has some wavy edges. The basal leaves sometimes can be really large. This is in the sorrel family, which most people don't know that unless, you know, in Europe they probably cook with sorrel. But it's a sour, like acidic, sour, I think lemon type of a flavor. But only in the small leaves when it's younger. Right now, anything that you tasted on this would be very bitter. But these seed heads will end up drying and becoming this brown chaff mostly. But you can rub the chaff off and winnow, and it takes a long time. I've done it before, and I've had dock seeds that I ground and turned into flour, and I tried to use it on its own to make crackers or some bread. And what happened was I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between ground cardboard and dock flour. It was just unappetizing in every way. But to use it as an extender, which a lot of our ancestors did if we needed to make flour last longer, for example, I mixed half and half dock seed flour with cornmeal, and I made some tortilla or tortilla corn flour, and I made tortillas that came out perfect. I couldn't taste anything off, and it really worked to extend the quantity of flour that I used. So nutritional value probably null from the dried seeds. From the greens, definitely there would be some nutritional value, but again, you want to get them when they're young so it's not too bitter. And hey, I've made it 1.7 steps. And right in front of us here is another plant. Doesn't look like much. Do you know what this plant is?
I do not.
I'm going to break a leaf and I'm going to
Wait, is it milkweed?
Oh, how do you know?
Actually, I dug into my memory banks.
Oh, good. Now you see I just broke a leaf. This is profuse latex production that's coming out of there. A lot of the wild lettuces, for example, have latex.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
Dandelion, you're going to, if you pull the flower, you'll see some latex, but this is profuse in comparison. Now, this is important, especially growing in this field, because this is one of the main foods for monarch butterflies. I think a lot of people know that now. As the monarchs migrate, anywhere that these can grow out in open fields is great. This is edible. Has to be cooked, or you can blanch, but when it starts to grow, and it can grow in pretty large patches, when they start to grow up, you can cut the top off and blanch those, and it's just a great vegetable, like asparagus. So you can blanch it and then stir fry or cook it and have a side dish. The flowers, when they come out, are edible. The seed pods, when they first start to form, they look really knobby, but when they're really soft and tender young, the inside where all the fluff and seeds come from, before it gets old, it's just like this, almost kind of like corn silk, creamy, and it's good to dice up and cook and eat as well. But there's a common plant that looks similar to this called dogbane, and in the young stages it's really hard to tell the difference. But dogbane is bitter, it is toxic, and milkweed is not. So when people think, actually not even think, there's some books out there where they say you must cook milkweed in 3 changes of water to get rid of the bitterness.
I think I've heard that, actually.
It's not milkweed. That's dogbane that they're talking about. Milkweed is not bitter. So it's, again, a lot of experts would not be able to identify it. Now I've read where if these leaves on the top are longer than the ones that are coming out, it's milkweed. Dogbane would have, these would be slightly shorter than the ones that are coming out. Now I wouldn't use that as my only guide. I know that milkweed has a hollow stem. I'm not going to cut this.
Sure.
Milkweed also has kind of a squared stem. This, I can feel edges on this compared to dogbane, which would be round. But anyway, it's a great edible. Right here, I see one right by your foot, and I see this one. I don't really see a lot more in this vicinity, so there's no way if you know, this is a park, I wouldn't take it out of it, but I wouldn't cut this one, right, because it's not a large field. So being respectful of how,
sure,
how the plant grows. Again, walking just a few feet, you know, I go back to my passion of people usually go on a hike and there's like this green wall and they're afraid to cross the bound. Everything's poison ivy, but you know, we already talked about this red clover, we already talked about this dock, but right down here, this little fern-like leaf is in the carrot family. In the carrot family is also the most toxic plant in North America, known as water hemlock.
Oh yeah.
This is not water hemlock. This is actually a wild carrot, which is introduced here. The scientific name is no different than the carrot that we buy at the grocery store. So it's identical, except in its growing conditions. One, it's white, and also it's pretty fibrous, just due to the harsh growing conditions. But it is a carrot. You can crush this up and smell it, and you will smell carrot. But I'll give some examples of what it looks like as we just stretch about 5 feet over here. This is a wild carrot. So I'm going to step off into this field. And this is a wild carrot plant. And a lot of people will know this. They'll call it Queen Anne's lace. The thing with common names is somebody may see hemlock and say Queen Anne's lace. And maybe that's fine in their area, but if you say, I want to eat this plant, all Queen Anne's lace is not edible. One of the little funny ways to identify wild carrot is they say Queen Anne had hairy legs. I have no idea if that's true or not, but you can see the little hairs on this. For the carrot, it is true. So these little fern-like leaves, this hairy stem, it's not hollow. There's no purple splotching on it. But actually, one little close-up here, if you can zoom in. Not all Queen Anne's lace has this purple flower in the center. There's some bug or something right there. But you see in the center, there's one flower that's a different color. It's purple. Some of the flower heads may not have any difference at all. They may all be white, but that's a pretty good indicator. But it has this purple flower in the center, maybe. Has a hairy stem, smells like carrot, and of course, when you pull it up, you'll see kind of a fibrous but a white carrot. It exactly tastes like carrot, maybe a little spicier. But if you're going to make a soup stock, or you want to, you know, add a carrot flavor to something roasted, the leaves, the flowers, the root obviously can be added, and I mean, it's literally a carrot. Another interesting fact, I use these carrot flowers because sometimes they grow very abundant. I actually have it growing in my house, and they're just non-stop producing But wildflowers contain a lot of yeast, and yeast is something that's used in baking, but it's also used in creating alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, but what I really love is fermented carbonated beverages. There's something some people are familiar with called elderberry cordial, where you can take the elderberry flower head, mix it with your homemade sweet lemonade, and let it sit for about 24 hours, and it'll create a kind of a bubbly lemonade. Alcohol content less than kombucha, obviously not any issue with children. It's just slightly carbonated. Carrots do the same thing. So I've taken some leftover fruit and made a nice kind of a fruity sweet drink, added carrot flour and let it ferment, and then I actually put it in bottles, plastic bottles, and let it sit on the counter for just a few days until it starts to get tight. There's nothing like cracking open a fresh carbonated beverage that you made from taking a wild flower and letting the yeast do its work on your sweet drink.
That's so interesting.
So this one was overgrowing right where they mowed, so I figured I would pull this out, but as I peel this back, you can see this is a very small white carrot. I've had some that are as big as my thumb, but this is in every way, shape, and form Daucus carota, the exact type of carrot that we get at the grocery store. You know, nature is just so abundant. I can only make it about 7 steps. If you didn't quit recording, it would be hilarious to watch me walk half a footstep. But this, a lot of people would recognize this as I'm
not sure about that one.
Wild onion. You know, that's what they would say. I've got green onions growing in my yard. It's actually garlic. This is, it's got a round stem. It's in flower right now. Flowers come out, it's going to start having seeds. But if I pull this up, what's unique about garlic is that it usually separates, right? So you have a clove of garlic and you'll have a little kind of a hoof-shaped piece of clove that will break off, right? So if we pulled this up and peeled the skin back, you'd see little bitty bulblets or cloves that would come off. But it's really strong. It's not ramps and it's not onion, it's wild garlic. Definitely edible, but it's very strong. So, you know, if you like kimchi and things like that, which I know that you do, this is a strong onion, but when it's growing low to the ground before the flower, even the flowers, this right here, you could just drop in a stir fry and it would give you a huge onion flavor to your food, but it'll stick around. So this is thistle. I probably don't even need to describe this. Now it's a particular type. This is nodding thistle. It's actually one of my favorite flowers. Really strong, perfumey odor, but I love how when the flower head gets heavy, it bends over, it nods. I just love this. I mean, this is just hard to replicate. This is artwork right here, in my opinion.
It really is.
But thistles, every gardener or farmer would know how much they hate them because they replicate, you know, very, very fast. You're going to have a field full of them and they're spiky. But every thistle is edible. It's like celery. So it's just, this stalk is full of water. You can peel the spines off, get your knife and scrape down the side, and it's just edible raw. So if you need that thirst quench, here's your water. It's basically, again, just like eating celery. And it's pretty. And right next to it is something that we just looked at. This is just a different variety of carrot, or not variety, but a different carrot growing with a nice little flower top. Looking at the sun. So if you notice this is just another little, this is not an edibility thing, but see the direction this flower is facing?
Yes.
And this one right here, they're all tilting kind of this direction. That's because the sun is here. In the afternoon, these flowers would be facing this direction because the sun would be over there.
Awesome. So it follows the sun.
It does. Yeah, so if you're trying to find direction, I wouldn't rely on that, but it is pretty unique. So again, another look at wild garlic. Come on. In flower, or about to create seeds. It is a weed. It's introduced. It's kind of hard to pull up sometimes, but I'm gonna see if I can get lucky here and get a look. Oh yeah, here we go. So these bulbs, you can already see the clove on that one starting to separate.
Oh yeah.
But I'm gonna use this large one here. And again, as we're standing here, this is a mowed path, and I'm right on literally the edge of where they mow. So this is it's, you know, I don't feel that I'm doing any harm as we're pulling this off. But let me get to the underlayer here. It's going to be nice and bright white. Takes just a second here. Just like peeling an onion at home. Peel this back. But again, this is garlic, and I'm going to show how it's easy to see the resemblance. Actually, I can see this clove right under here that I'm about to peel off. Right here. So very indicative of garlic, right? That we would grow at home.
Absolutely.
And it's got an unmistakable smell and taste. It actually is very pleasant. It's just so strong that it sticks around, but I'll give you a whiff as well.
Oh yeah.
Unmistakable, but again, it's so strong. Now, what's interesting, we're right next to it. I don't have an apothecary. I'm not an herb guy for medicine, but this is a plant called St. John's wort that's growing right next to it, and it's been used extensively in research and used for depression. I believe this is spotted St. John's wort. But if I get this leaf, I'm wondering if it will leave a purple stain as I crush it. Yeah. See that?
Yeah, I can see it.
So I don't know if there's any implication this can be used for dye, but really what this plant is used for is its medicinal properties. I don't know a good way just to say, hey, this is how you spot it in an open field, because it catches my eye, but may not catch everyone's eye. And we're also surrounded by a lot more of that evening primrose with that large peppery white root. And I may pull one up just to give a view if it comes up easy. So here's this white root. Some of them are much larger, and again, this is a very prolific weed, that some would say. But it's just a nice peppery addition to root vegetables like we talked about. Okay, this literally was like 1 1/4 step. But one of my favorite things to find in the wild is not just, you know, this carrot that I can take a nibble of. No, you don't. You know, you go home and cook. You don't just grab things off the shelf and say, that's delicious. You usually blend it with something. But there's one thing that can be used absolutely on its own at any given time, and that's mint. So wild mint, whenever we find it, is a treasure, I think. When I'm on backpacking trips, if I see wild mint, I'll collect the leaves and put them in my water. It's just such a refreshing kick, you know, to be used just as is. Mint, the mint family, pretty easy to identify. Mints have a square stem, and they have opposite leaves. So if you think alternate, one arm and one leg, this would be on a stem. This is alternate, but opposite. And we're going to look at an example here. This is Beebalm, but if you're able to see, the stem is square. Of course, you'll be able to feel it, and the leaves are opposite. Not all mint has a minty flavor, but this does for sure. And this is, like I said, Beebalm, or some call it wild bergamot. This one actually smells almost like a blend between a mint and an Italian herb. Take a whiff. But something very interesting about Beebalm, there's a couple species. Up north there's one they call Oswego tea from the Oswego tribe. So a little historical information. No taxation without representation. Let's kick all of our tea overboard. Boston Tea Party, when they did that, you know, they didn't have tea, so what they relied on was this Beebalm as their local tea. And of course it doesn't have caffeine, but it's a nice herbal tea. I just love this, and I'll mix it with green tea just to give this wild herbal flavor. But again, square stem, opposite leaves. This will have pretty kind of lavender color flowers here. There's some that have a nice scarlet color, but it's just so awesome to see.
Now, do any of these teas have like a effect, like if you have an upset stomach or anything like that?
Actually, yes. So all mint are known to help with settling the stomach, or, you know, think of taking a gas X pill because you have bloating or whatever. Mint is known to do wonders, and you can do a cold infusion where you let it sit in cold water, and you can have this nice refreshing cold tea that when you drink, it really does work. It'll go in and help alleviate a lot of that gas buildup. So keys are great, and mint, I just love it. So kind of hard not to see this wild daisy growing here in this field. I'm sure there's more, but this is the Oxeye Daisy, and it is edible. The little leaves, they actually look so similar to the pepper grass that we looked at earlier, but this is not peppery in any way, shape, or form. It's very sweet. There's a little trail nibble. I'll get you one. It just has such a cool, sweet, I mean, it's a green flavor, but it's not off-putting in any way. It's just
No,
nice
not at
and
all.
sweet. So you can add, I mean, the basil flowers or leaves are a lot bigger, but adding that to a salad just to give it a little different kick. I'd actually think about slicing apples and this and putting it together, you know, that'd be nice. But and right next to it is something I mentioned a minute ago called goldenrod. So goldenrod gets the bad rap from ragweed because they both have yellow flowers blooming at the same time. But a unique property with goldenrod, and there's many species. This may be Canadian or Canada goldenrod. It's not sandpapery, but it does have a little texture. But I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. We'll try. But if I hold it up to the sun, you can look through the leaf like it almost has millions of perforated holes. I don't know.
That might come through. I'm not sure.
Hopefully it does. But you can see it here in real life,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
But this has kind of an anise or anise flavor, and it's just a subtle, sweet aroma. My hand still smells a little bit like that Beebalm, but it's such a pleasant winter tea for me. When the leaves or the flowers come out, I take the flowers and some of the green leaves, make a nice herbal tea. It's just so, it's very reminiscent of fall for me. I like it. But goldenrod. So this is, you know, we're walking by this blackberry patch, and this is green. It's all green. It's grown upright. It's very tender and supple. But we don't see any blackberries. Not exactly right here. If we look right behind it, you can see blackberries forming. Now the thing about blackberries and raspberries, or you know, these families, and some people have these at home, this is not going to produce blackberries this year. It produces the cane this year. Next year this will be full of flowers and blackberries. So that's last year, and it's producing the berries, which, you know, depending on.
Actually, that's new information. I'm glad you shared that because I did not know that.
Yeah, you're not going to get any flowers off of this. It's putting all of its energy in. Mufflers like that. Actually, that was a motorcycle. It's putting all of its energy in growing this nice, strong cane. But next year, profuse white flowers, real pretty. It's in the rose family, so it'll have 5 petals. But all of these are good herbal teas, right? So you can take these leaves and add it to, not going to have any flavor really on its own, but vitamin C, different vitamin contents. Again, not being an herbalist, the roots I believe you can use as a tea for something, but I really like things that taste good. I do like herbal teas, and I've mixed this with some of my other plants before, but what's really awesome is obviously when you get a good blackberry harvest. And a lot can be done with that. But this is nice. It's just a huge wall. I hope they don't cut it down. Next year, whoever walks by within arm's reach will be able to pluck as many blackberries as they'd like. So we're talking about identifying plants, and I'm just walking. I've studied, I don't know, for almost 30 years, and I can see a plant and pretty readily identify it. And you actually just pointed this out, that this is the common ragweed, and you're correct. And I look at it and I say, yeah, look at these fern-like leaves and its hairy stem. It's ragweed, but how many people would think, oh, this is wild carrot? And I'll show you really quick as I step right here to wild carrot. I don't know how to, you know, someone's going to really identify this quickly at a young age.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah, because it's got a hairy stem. Now the way that it grows, it's got, you know, one leaf way down here, one coming up here, the way it comes out of this axil. But obviously, if you're unsure, just wait until it flowers. You know, when it flowers, it's a dead giveaway.
Very good.
So we have a plant in the nightshade family, which some people will recognize by the fruit. But if I look at this, this is a thorny plant with a real pretty kind of pale purple flower. And what it's going to produce is little yellow tomatoes. They look like tomatoes. So tomatoes are obviously in the nightshade family. They don't have thorns. but it's very similar in appearance. This is called horse nettle for the common name. It's a common weed that grows in flower beds, and even with gloves on, when you pull them, sometimes those thorns will prick you and it itches. But it's toxic. I don't think it's kill you toxic, but maybe give you an upset stomach. But clearly not a tomato, but it's in the family and will present and look just like a green tomato or a yellow tomato.
Now, nightshade, I've heard like in TV shows, movies, a little bit of even cartoons. So it seems like they give it a stronger history of
the deadly black nightshade.
Yeah.
Nightshades, potatoes are the nightshade family, not the sweet potatoes, but potatoes have flowers that look just like this. Tomatoes, flowers look like that. They're just not purple. There are different nightshades, but the one that's really bad is the toxic one known as belladonna. It doesn't look anything like this, but it's definitely deadly toxic.
And the name sounds deadly, nightshade.
Yeah. Or it sounds like special ops.
Oh, I like that.
Anyway. This is a really good example of milkweed that we saw earlier as it's about to flower. Dogbane does not flower in the same way. So this is a clear indicator that we're looking at milkweed and not dogbane. Another interesting fact that I didn't mention is the stalk of this, and both dogbane. Dogbane was traditionally used for cordage. Another common name for it is Indian hemp, because hemp is a very strong cordage. Milkweed is just the same. With this green stalk, I could cut it down and kill it, strip the leaves and pull the bark. The bark will, or not the bark, the outer piece will peel off in pretty long strips. And I could make a rope, probably about this long, out of this plant that myself, anybody we gave it to would not be able to break. It is extremely strong.
Wow.
Strong tensile strength, and then when bound together in a nice twisted manner, produces super strong cordage. What do we need cordage for these days? I've never been on a trip. Well, I have been on a trip where my backpack failed and I had to duct tape a piece of it together, but knowing how to make a quick lashing or cordage is interesting. Not as necessarily practical these days, but it's a cool trick for kids. But anyway, this would be a great stage to get this, blanch it, and throw that into a salad, or as a side to some nice broiled lamb or something. I don't know.
Love lamb.
Coming around the bend, we see this little grove of something that's growing. It looks like a shrub, looks like some type of bush. Very interesting. One leaf has plenty of leaflets here. And the stem, I'm just giving a little quick identification. This is something, if we can get a look, the stem is white, but it's actually not. If I take my finger and wipe it, you see it's turned green.
Oh yeah.
This is a little,
I don't know if that's going to show on the video, but yeah, I absolutely can see.
If you back away, you might see it. But it's a bloom that grows, or that forms. It may be yeast. I'm not exactly sure, but it's an identifier on some plants. This is sumac. This is smooth sumac.
Now, sumac in itself has a bad name when you hear just sumac.
Because people associate it with poison sumac, which grows in swampy areas. It's in the family of poison ivy. It's supposed to be worse, if you encounter it. But this will produce clusters of red berries, or I don't know if they're actually berries, drupes maybe, but they are coated in really fine hairs that exude malic acid. So it's just really tart, like a lemon. And very common in the States for the old pioneers to make a local sumac aid, like lemonade. You make really sour water and add sugar or honey to it, and you have lemonade. And it works tremendously. But that acid also, one unique thing that I've done, I don't know if anyone has done this, I've never read about it, but to make cheese, a quick cheese, you can take milk and add lemon juice or vinegar to it, and it'll curdle, and then you can make paneer or different types of cheese. I've actually made that by getting the acid off of this, like I'm making sour water, and I've added it to milk, and I've curdled it and made cheese from using sumac. But I've also made a syrup out of this. I call it my golden, it's like this vial of golden wonder. But basically making lemonade from sumac, the sour water, the sugar, and I cook that down until it becomes a thick consistency as syrup. And you want to talk about having a little scone or some breakfast treat, or ice cream, and drizzle this yellow tart lemony sauce over the top. Wonderful. But right now we don't see any of the berries. Hopefully we will, but this is smooth sumac, and very easy to see by the way that it's growing. So coming up on a really large specimen of something known as pokeweed or poke salad. When it does flower, these tiny flowers here, really pretty unique, pretty flower when it opens up. But everyone in our area is familiar with the drooping dark purple berries that will stain any clothes you get them on. But this is toxic. Some people have died from eating this plant, but a lot of people still do eat the plant, and they'll eat it when it's a very young shoot, maybe no more than 8 inches tall, with no signs of redness. Some of the plant you can see red starting to get in it, especially as we get down lower on the stalk. I don't know if you can catch it in the shade, but the root is probably the most toxic part of this plant. But to cook this, it's highly recommended to make sure you're collecting at the right stage, and then cooking 3 changes of water just to make sure you're getting the toxins out. But after that, you have a palatable green, like you have a pot full of greens or spinach or whatnot. So very interesting. And right behind it, I just happened to notice, we have a black walnut. So if you can see these clusters back here. Oh, yeah. So the black walnut has a little bit of a medicinal hint of flavor to it as you eat the walnut. I've seen them at Costco. You know, some people will farm these, but it's different than the English walnut. Very hard to get to. The husk, when it grows, you get these big green balls, and if you step on them, they make your shoes black. So really good black dye can be made from this. The walnuts themselves are great to eat when they're ripe, but the interesting thing that I've done with this, again, I don't drink alcohol, but I made an alcohol by making a tincture. So tinctures are medicine extracted from a plant through alcohol absorption, and there's plenty of tinctures that people make or you can buy. It's great for like worm detoxing and whatnot, but it also has a unique flavor. And in Italy, they make something called nocino, which is a black walnut liqueur. So they will take green walnuts or the black walnut, when it's young and green, you can slice right through it with a knife, mix it with maybe some orange zest or some ginger, and you'll let it sit for about a year, and it becomes a very dark black liquid. And that is a really strong black walnut extract. You mix that half and half with maple syrup, and you have a sweet black walnut extraction that you can drizzle over ice cream. I've had it at restaurants, but it's very interesting, and it worked out really well. So just as a little additive for flavoring to a dessert. So we just see something that's kind of hidden here, off behind one of my favorite trees. This is sassafras, and it's so great to see in this short example all the different 3-leaf structures. So if you see this first leaf I'm going to look at, it's entire. It has no lobes. It's just one solid leaf. And underneath here we see one that has what we call a mitten. So it has 1 lobe. And then right over here we have one that has 2 lobes. The only other tree that grows like this is mulberry, where you have the 3 different leaf types. But mulberry has tiny teeth, and it feels a little sandpapery. Sassafras does not. It's smooth. This plant, there's a few uses for it. If I crush a leaf and smell it, to me it smells like Fruit Loops, like the cereal. But it is mucilaginous. And what that means is it gets very thick and gummy. The dried leaves, there's a restaurant when I visit Atlanta that I like to eat at called Papado's. It's Papado's Seafood Kitchen. It's like a Cajun restaurant. And they have gumbo, and you can ask for filet, and they'll bring you powder that you can add to your gumbo if it's not thick enough. And it's like cornstarch, it'll make it thick. Filet is dried sassafras leaves. So I'm in a restaurant utilizing a wild food that we consider wild, but it has a great historical use. The most common use for sassafras is in the root, because it smells undeniably like root beer. There are studies where they injected lab rats with way too much of it and it caused cancer. I'm not a rat and I don't work in the laboratory, but I've drank plenty of sassafras tea. You just dig the roots. Smaller roots you can wash them and just boil them whole. Larger roots you can peel off the red outer bark, which is what you want, and make a warm liquid that smells like root beer. Add sugar to it, it tastes like root beer. Add seltzer water to that syrup if you let it cook down, and you have a sparkling wild root beer.
Nice.
Wonderful. A little bit further down we see a really nice specimen of wild lettuce. This one's growing really tall. It's got a huge hollow stem. If I bend this in half it'll just break. But it's kind of hard to mistake. We've looked at wild carrots and lots of different things. This stands out. It's got these gigantic leaves that look like really big dandelion leaves. I mean, this is huge, but it looks similar. And notice this latex, this milky sap coming out. It's not as profuse as the milkweed that we saw, but this is another indicator. And on the bottom here, I don't know how close you can get, but there's tiny hairs growing off of this midrib, this vein. These are indicators that this is wild lettuce. And when it's young, it'll have a really nice basil rosette. Eat them fresh, drop them in salads. Some salads on their own, you get lettuce from the store, sometimes it has a little bitterness. That's why we had salad dressing.
Yeah.
Some of these have a little bitterness, but as any plant grows taller, it becomes bitter, like this. But this is wild lettuce. Now there's a craze, fad, maybe it's worth it, I don't know, but some people have been posting a lot about nature's opium for pain medicine, where you can take this whole plant, put it in a crock pot, let it cook overnight and break down, and you get this nice thick brown murky residue that can be used for pain medicine. I don't have severe pain that I need to manage that with, or I would try it probably, but I do know that it's just a great, nice, crisp addition for lettuce. As soon as these open up, you're going to see really nice orange, reddish orange, trumpet-shaped flowers. They call this Trumpet Creeper. It's creeping all over the place.
It is. Now you have some social media sites on Facebook, on Instagram. It's called Outdoor Reeducation.
Yep.
Why did you come up with that name?
It's it really comes down to what we've lost. And when I start my plant walks, I'll ask, by a show of hands, who has ever picked a wild blackberry and eaten it? And almost all hands go up. And then I say, by a show of hands, who has ever plucked honeysuckle and tasted the nectar? Probably half, but still some hands. By a show of hands, who has ever tasted our native deciduous wild passion fruit? And it's usually 0. But then I'll throw a name out, like, how about maypop? Oh, my grandfather told me about that. But the hands go down, and I look at them and I say, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you don't know these plants. Somewhere during industrialization and society growing, our ancestors lost the need to know, and therefore they didn't pass it down. So what I've learned when I try to help people, I'm trying to re-educate, because it's not that we as a species don't know our land, we just need to be re-educated. So I'm trying to re-educate people on the outdoors as I will with this plant here. This is an oak tree, but there's basically two families, major families, white oak and red oak. Black oak is in the red oak family. But white oak has just nice smooth lobes. Every lobe comes around and it's just nice and rounded. When we see some species of red or black oak, there'll be a little bristle at the tip of every lobe. So that's one way to indicate if you're looking at a white oak or a black red oak species. And when we start talking about eating acorns and how to store them, there's a difference. White oak acorns will germinate the same year basically that they drop. And that means that there's a high probability that they could mold quicker if you don't space them out enough to let them dry, where red oak acorns germinate in the second year. So they store easier, store longer, but they have more tannins. But anyway, we're not eating acorns at the moment, but this is a nice white oak with no bristles on the tip. So we're in a little bit more of a wooded area, and what's common in areas like this are dogwood. Now you think, how did you know that that was a dogwood? It's not in flower. What gave it away? One of the ways to check, because there's many varieties, dogwood, what's interesting, it has a latex that lines its leaves, and with kids sometimes I'll break it, and I'd call it the magic hovering leaf. Let's see if I can get it here. Don't break all the way. Okay, so now, you know, I have a floating leaf. Here's my magic. Wait, magic leaf. But basically, it's like spider webs that are stuck in between the veins, right? So you're not going to find this on an oak. You're not going to find this on hickory. You're going to see this on dogwood. So if you think it's a dogwood and you break the leaf and you have this nice spider web type latex in the veins, you've got a dogwood.
Nice.
So we're just walking past this tree that has kind of an unmistakable knobbiness to the bark, and it's got these nice serrated alternate leaves. Maybe not easy to identify just passing by, but some of the varieties of this hackberry or sugarberry tree is they'll produce just copious amounts of little drupes, little berries. It's kind of like an M&M, where the outer shell has pulp and the inner is like a peanut M&M rather. So it's a seed. You can crunch the seed and eat the entire thing, but it's kind of hard on the teeth. But you can definitely pulverize and make a kind of a spread. I've taken them and pounded them and turned them into little, I call them protein bars, because it makes almost a complete protein when you eat the seed and the pulp together. And what's interesting about this is sometimes these can be hundreds of years old, huge, and they found all over the world. So definitely in Eastern and Western Europe, and in the United States, obviously. Some native encampments or archaeological sites, they found what they call middens, which is where we'll collect and discard or collect and hold plant foods. But they found piles of hackberries at some archaeological sites, knowing that our ancestors used this as a really valuable food source. So in some ways you could say most of us are here today because some of our ancestors used the hackberry for a complete source of, almost complete source of protein and food.
Nice.
So I turned around, and one thing that I was mentioning, if you pan around here, you're going to see that we've exited the wood line and we're about to enter the field. And where field meets woods, you have this interesting factor. You have things that have been dropped in this nice moist area, but you have a massive amount of sun exposure. And one of the great things that we have growing here is a wild grape. So you can see the flowers actually starting to come out. And this grape leaf, a couple things here. So grape leaves are pretty easy to identify. And if you've ever had dolmas or some Greek or Mediterranean food, they'll wrap lamb and rice in grape leaves. You can buy them in cans or jars at the store today, or get them at local restaurants. It's made from having grape leaves wrapped around the food. But also, obviously, what we know grapes for are the grape clusters. So these are going to produce grapes. Here's some that are starting to form. The thing with wild grapes, though, they have this acrid quality. So to eat them as they are, tart, grape flavor, but also a little bit of a acrid aftertaste. But you can take this, smash it up, blend it up, get the juice, and let it settle overnight, and all that acridness will settle to the bottom, and you can decant or pour the top off. And now you have raw grape juice, and you can mix that with equal parts sugar. And man, you want to talk about making some awesome jelly, because grapes have their own natural pectin, so you can make a really firm, natural wild grape jelly for whatever you use it for. So wild grapes, not necessarily just going to pluck and eat them, although you can, but to use them for different culinary uses, great. So just walking over, and I see a great example of a grape vine. We just looked at grapes coming from across the field, but this is pretty unmistakable. It's a dark gray, flaky, scaly bark. So way up in the top of this hackberry tree, which I can tell by its knobbiness, there are grapes that will definitely be produced, but they're going to be way out of our reach. Wow, so just walking and looking at this wood line, I see this blackberry, which again, this is its second year. So last year, this vine grew from the depths of this little wooded area, looking for sunlight, crept over and has been hanging here. And this year, it's in flower and it's going to produce nice blackberries for someone to consume. But it's just interesting how it's looking for light. It came out of the woods because it saw sunlight as we're approaching this field. Very interesting. But also, right next to it, this is a common eastern red cedar. It's not a true cedar, it's actually a juniper, but it is growing some nice berries. I think these are actually cones, and they're covered. They look white, but similar to some other things we've talked about. If I rub this white off, they're actually green. Now some people will know that you can take juniper berries and soak them in alcohol and extract the flavor, and you're going to get gin. I believe you were a gin connoisseur.
I was indeed.
Yeah, that was one of your flavors that you remembered from across the seas.
That's right.
But this is not edible. There's something called fujone, I think is the term. But the cones are. You can use this to crush it up. You know, what's common is, hey, I went deer hunting and I've got juniper berries and I've got this wild venison and juniper flavor. But something that I tried myself and it turned out really well. In Europe, maybe in some of the Western Europe countries, they have a drink, I believe it's pronounced shmreka.
Sounds familiar.
But they will take juniper berries and put them in sugar water and let them basically ferment for a few days. And when the berries will sink, you know, that's when they know it's ready. But it's like another type of wild lemonade. But I've made that and I let the water evaporate over time and just kept it in a jar. And it actually turned into a nice, really viscous, thick syrup that has it's a wild, tart, sweet flavor. It's really interesting. I just doing an experiment. I taste it every year, and it's just a nice. It's almost like honey. It never goes bad. But the drink itself was great. It was a lemonade flavor, but it had this, you know, slight evergreen undertone to it. Job keeping poison ivy down. But a lot of this right here is Virginia creeper, these leaves of 5.
Yeah.
But this park has been pretty clean from poison ivy, which is leaves of 3. Gets a bad rap. If I found it, I definitely would
Well,
want to show
I'm gonna ask you something. Right there on that tree to your left, climbing up. If I was out in the woods, is that poison ivy?
Which one are you pointing at?
This one right here.
No, if you pointed at the other one, I would say yes.
This one over here?
And we're going to go take a look.
Very nice.
So, you know, it's interesting that we're talking about it. Virginia creeper has 5 leaves.
Oh, okay. So from over there, it
leaves.
looked like 3 leaves. My apologies.
And we've got a couple of things going
Actually,
on.
right in here.
This is that trumpet creeper vine, which we looked at. It was going to have those really nice red flowers. But right next to it is Virginia creeper, which has 5 leaflets. What's interesting though is sometimes as it starts to grow in its young stage, you might only see 3.
Kind of like this one right here.
This is the trumpet creeper still.
Okay.
Because this has a lot of leaflets on there. But sometimes these two may be missing, and people will say, is that poison ivy? And we're going to look right here, and I'll show you the difference. So poison ivy has 3 leaflets, but it has such a varied appearance. It's probably the most disputed, is this poison ivy question on some of the Facebook groups.
It's always one of my questions.
Right. So one way to show is you have these 2 leaflets on the side, and what's different about this one here in the middle as far as where they come from?
It's coming straight out.
It's longer, yeah. So the side leaflet's attached directly to the stem, and the center one is long.
Right, right.
So when you see that, that's a clear indication that this could be poison ivy. The leaves themselves, if you look, I'm not sure if you can see down in there, but they're opposite. So you would have, like, I don't know really if you can see down in there, but one leaflet comes off, and then a little bit further up the stem, another one comes off. And it has a hairy vine, which you don't really have a good indicator here.
Right, right.
But also, sometimes they don't have mittens, but see how this one has like a thumb like this?
Yes.
And this one has a thumb like this?
Yes.
Sometimes this one, like right here, will have 2 thumbs, like this. So sometimes they have no thumbs. Sometimes they're a lot more jagged. But that center leaflet being longer, now we'll go back to this Virginia Creeper, even if it only had 2, the center leaflet, it doesn't have a long stem. It's really just attached all at the same spot.
Sure. Good. That's a great comparison. Thank you for pointing that out, because I'm often confused by that very thing.
And I was going to show it's great that this happened all in the same spot. I said there's some things that look similar. Now if I get down here and I grab this poison ivy, you would say, what are you doing? It does not look like poison ivy. Look, you have 2 leaflets, and then the center is longer.
Yes.
And red. Poison ivy is supposed to have red in the center. Well, very clear distinction is in its leaf arrangement, and you can see this is a eastern box elder or elm leaf maple. But do you see the opposite leaf arrangement?
I do.
That's directly across from that. Poison ivy would be, sorry, box elder. Poison ivy would look like this, where you have one down here and then alternately up here. But look at the similarity to poison ivy versus box elder. Look how similar that is.
It's very similar.
But this does not have an opposite leaf arrangement. They are alternate. And here's one growing up maybe underneath. You can see one leaf, another one. You're touching it there.
Oh, sorry.
But hasn't bothered me yet. This is a common thorn known as Greenbriar. And if you look up and down it, there are definite spikes everywhere. Some of these grow very huge. But where there's this really strong thorn, as you go to the top, they become a little rubbery. And if I keep pulling with a little bit of pressure, so I'm pulling away, eventually it's going to break loose where it's most tender, about right there. And this tender tip is very similar to asparagus. It's literally just the growing end of an edible plant. The only caution I have is where there's some varieties of this smilax or greenbriar that have kind of a white bloom on them, and I believe this one does. It would tell me that this one's bitter. Most of the greenbriar that you find does not have that white bloom, or some of it's called sawbriar, where it's just so intense with spikes. But I'm going to taste this one. Actually, no, there's no bitterness to this one. So I will consume, and here's another one here, ready for the eating.
Oh, thank you. Not bad at all.
Just a green. I've stir-fried these with red peppers and sesame oil. Sometimes I find them as big as my pinky. Like, I mean, you can really collect a lot of these on some walks.
Nice.
So I was talking about oaks earlier, and the white oak, and how the lobes are nice, smooth. Well, I get to a black or red oak species, as we do here. We'll see every lobe has a little bristle at the end of it, if you notice that.
I do.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's coming through, but I can see it.
Yeah, so this is clearly not a white oak. It is an oak, and it will produce an acorn. Now, if this particular one has a variety, it produces substance, you know, good size, it would be good. And of course, it stores different than the white oak, but even just for walking through with a family and say, hey, here's an oak tree, this is part of the black oak family or the white oak family. White oak, no bristles. Black, red oak, you're going to see these bristles.
Very nice.
So we're walking again on this field edge and woods, and point out one thing. This is an invasive bush honeysuckle. Honeysuckles have opposite leaves, but each of these will produce some type of flower. It's not the Japanese honeysuckle that we're familiar with, but pretty invasive, takes over, as well as another invasive. This is a wild rose, Rosa multiflora. It can have pink, white, different colored flowers, real pretty. But the flowers are spent, and what you're looking at here are what are known as rose hips. The ladies will be familiar with rose hips because of having rose hip facial treatments or scents or rose hip tea, and it is very high in vitamin C. Inside this hip, which in the winter will become very dark scarlet red, will be a bunch of prickly seeds, but the pulp, which is very small on the outside, you can eat it or you can, you know, break it down and make a syrup out of it. Very rich, wonderful, tart and sweet taste if you add some sugar to it, but high in vitamin C and easy to collect. I mean, this is growing at the edge of this, and every one of these will be, I mean, you can get a nice handful, go home and make you a jelly, or dry it out and mix it with some other things for herbal teas. But it's not native, and it does like to take over, and these seeds will proliferate over time. But why not take advantage of it and collect them for some edible use? So just happened to walk upon what is apparently a spent thistle. So we saw a really pretty colored thistle earlier, and it is edible as far as that stalk, where it's kind of like celery. But what about when it's spent? The you know, I like to think of the different uses of plants. Well, inside thistle, you have what's called thistle down, and this is fluffy material. Actually, sometimes you can pull out a really large amount of this fluff, and this is known as kind of like a flash tinder. So when you're backpacking and you have your little flint striker,
Yeah.
this would light instantly, but it would also go out instantly, so it'd be a flash flame. But if you mix it with some petroleum, like chapstick product or wax, or my preference would be some pine sap, it'll become like a wick for a candle. So you strike that flash tinder, it goes, and then it starts wicking the pine sap or chapstick or whatever
Awesome.
you remix with it.
Awesome.
But a nice flash tinder from thistle. Walking by a minute ago, we were talking about how well this park has done with preventing poison ivy from being on the main
Yep.
part, but here's a great view of our nemesis, and it's coming out in this nice young form, clear visibility to that longer stem on the center leaflet in all of these occasions. There's some more growing over here. Again, it'd be easy to see if I could peel it back, the alternate leaf shape. I just don't want to touch, but we'll see if I can, if you can zoom in on that. The leaves are not opposite one another. They're definitely alternate.
Absolutely.
We talked about the hackberry earlier, the sugarberry, and why it was important, but we didn't see any of the actual fruit. But if you can see here, these little drupes, they're tiny green. They're going to get bigger. They'll probably double in size, and they'll become a scarlet red color. But they are, you know, vital to our history. And I actually, they're slightly sweet on their own, and literally just chewing on them is good, other than it's hard to chew. It's a nice crunch. Sensitive teeth when we reach our ages, but mortal and pestle, pound them up. It makes a nice little paste, and It's actually a really good treat, and when you can collect them in abundance, why not get that added nutritional value. By the way, I'm stepping right on poison ivy, as we just looked at a minute ago. It can grow tall, it can grow across the ground. There's a little piece of it coming out. There's more over there. Leaves of 3 aren't always bad, but definitely gotta watch out for poison ivy. So here's a nice example of a thistle. Again, this is, potentially highly invasive. Once it flowers, it can be everywhere. We're at the edge of the field near the road where this is, not part of the wildflower garden. So I'm going to peel this down and try not to prick myself too much, and we'll see if we can get us a nice edible. Nice Mora clipper here for the bush crafters. The root is also edible. The root can be dug and put in salads, or sorry, in soups and whatnot.
Is this what you were talking about, making some cordage?
No, this, we could always test it, but this is not something that I've traditionally used for cordage.
Oh, okay. I just saw that peel come off there.
Yeah, it did peel off really nice and simple. And I'm going to try to continue peeling this to get all these spikes off. These spikes are pretty unforgiving. Once you feel one, you'll remember it. But I could scrape down at 90 degrees to my blade, but I'm just a quick hurried slice of this. Go ahead and peel this piece off because I've already peeled the majority of that. I'm just going to, so at the top it's a little bit tougher, and I'll give you some here in a second.
All right.
But there was a prickle right there. I'm just trying to make sure I clear these the best I can. Yeah, these are no fun to handle in any way, shape, or form.
I bet.
So it'll probably be tougher at the bottom. As we're up here at the top, I'm just trying to do my best to clear that off. But it's a good example of a pretty substantial vegetable that is not really thought of. I'm just going to chop it here. See if we can continue peeling this off, but sometimes this 90-degree scrape here is a good way to clean, because the outside is just more fibrous. But it's full of water, so for one, you could chew, and if it's too fibrous, here you want to hold, and I'll cut. You can chew to get the water and spit out the pulp, or if it was nice and tender enough, chew and consume. But yeah, that's pretty tough.
A little tough,
but full of water, right?
Yeah.
So at the top where that final piece was grown out, that's the most tender. But there's definitely plenty of water in this. So for a quick treat, the more tender, not tender, we just chew it, spit it out. But definitely a little tougher down at the bottom. But you can come to some places and you find, they're just growing everywhere. If you don't mind trying to get away from all those prickles, completely edible, no, dangerous lookalikes or anything along that sort. But get your water, get your fiber for the day.
I like it.
Yeah. So we can't walk through a field without noticing a dandelion, which is not native to North America, but it was introduced. It was actually brought here as a cash crop. And as we're looking down, this is pretty unmistakable. It's an aster, obviously, with all these wonderful. Who wants to say she loves me not on a dandelion? We usually do that with daisies, right?
That's right.
But one interesting fact about dandelion is it only has one flower per stalk. There's another plant called cat's ear or flatweed, and it has dandelion type flowers. But when you look at the stalk, you'll have a branch off where you might have a different flower over here, a different flower here. Dandelion's only going to have the one. Dandelion also has this milky latex. And of course the leaves, which these are tiny here. Let's pull this up. And almost, you can't really tell too much, but dandelion just means like lion's teeth because it's so jagged. But these tiny leaves, these are not too bitter. This is what you would find in a nice salad mix at a fancy restaurant or something. People will take these and make fritters. I personally dug up the root and roasted it in the oven after washing it, and roasted bitterness is basically what a coffee bean is. So it's a kind of like a campfire coffee substitute, like chicory, which we haven't seen around here. But you definitely can eat the entire plant. Medicinally, I know that dried dandelion root is good herbal tea for maybe some urinary issues. My father-in-law loves to make dandelion root and leaf tea. He grows it on purpose and dries it, and says if he drinks a glass before bed, he'll sleep better than ever. I haven't tried that, but anyway, dandelion, more vitamin A than any other plant on earth.
Wow.
So we crept down to the water's edge. There's a plant that grows near water. It's called jewelweed. This currently, I know it's flowery in other areas. It has a nice little orange flower. It's called touch me not because when the seeds are ready, if you touch the flower, it will explode and spread the seeds everywhere. But jewelweed, a lot of people know that name in association with poison ivy because it's one of the top remedies for poison ivy. If you are in poison ivy and you think you might have it on you, you would take this plant and crush it. It's real slimy, and just rub it over, and it would prevent the poison ivy from basically sucking in your skin. And then go home and wash it off with soap and a rag. But one interesting fact why it's called jewelweed, and we'll see if we can get an example here in the sunlight. The leaf, when it's exposed to water, or underwater rather, it has such a good repelling property that it will shimmer like silver. So I'm going to put it underwater in the sunlight, and it should look like a fish lure with some silver iridescence. We'll hope that your camera can catch it. Can you see that with your visible eye?
It's hard to tell from this angle.
I definitely see it here for sure. So we can do a swapperoo. I can move over there. And let you come over here. It may be on there and we're doing this for not, but either way, if you step on down there. Yeah, so with the right angle, with the leaf underwater, we'll get this water just shimmering like silver.
That's incredible.
All right.
So that's bringing us to the end of our fabulous day with Robert and his plant identification and all the uses and some things to avoid. Man, I really appreciate your time. I'm so glad to see you again, and it's been a great day.
That was my pleasure, for sure. You know, it's excited to share this with someone other than my wife and lovely daughters, who probably aren't as interested. No, they've enjoyed learning about this through over the last couple decades as I learned myself. But what a pleasure to be back with you and nerd out over some plant information, because unfortunately a lot of people don't know it, and it just makes it a awesome experience to go visit a local park and actually know your plants.
And if you had one tip or tidbit, what would it be?
Just get out and start walking. But I would say that in today's age, where we have all access to any information on our phones or handheld computers, start taking pictures, because even with an iPhone, which I use, I'm not sure about Android, how it works, but you can take a picture of a plant, and the info button, if you select it, it'll actually take you to Wikipedia pages, and it'll properly identify if you get a close-up picture. But if nothing else, just start changing your interest to look a little closer.
Awesome. So that's it for today. Just remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next adventure.